Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's Talking Tim webinar. My name is Kevin Vita, and I'll be helping facilitate today's webinar. This webinar is sponsored by the Federal Highway Administration and hosted by the National Operations Center of Excellence, also known as NOCO. As a quick reminder, NOCO offers a variety of resources to support the transportation systems management and operations community. I'll cover a few logistics for today's webinar. All of the attendees are in listen-only mode by default, but we'd like you to stay engaged by using the chat box for identifying yourself and the agency you represent. We will have a question and answer session at the end of the presentations, so we encourage you to ask any questions you have during the presentations in the Q&A pod as they come to your mind at any time. The questions will be read out loud one at a time by the moderator, and our presenters will answer each question. I would also like to state that this webinar is being recorded, and the recording and slide deck will be available on the NOCO website within a few days. So that's all I have. So with that, I'll hand it over to our Master of Ceremonies for today, Joe Tebow.
Hey, thanks, Kevin. Thanks to NOCO, as always, for hosting Talking Tim, the great job that you all do for us. And thanks to all of you for taking time out of your busy day to join us, for another Talking Tim. And we have a really great, as always, today, a really great topic to discuss and some updates to share with you. So if you would, next slide. Yeah, our standard disclaimer there, because within a lot of presentations you'll see products that are being used. So USDOT, FHWA, we're not endorsing anything. If you see it out there, it's because that's what's being used, and that's what the folks are utilizing and have chosen to utilize. So we're not promoting anything. It's just what the folks are using. So you'll see some of that. With that said. Yeah, here's today's agenda. As I said, I'll give you some updates on some of the things that have been going on here on the FHWA side. We have two great presentations and speakers with us today. We'll have Justin Neff with the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, and we'll also have Kareem Williams from the North Texas Tollway Authority. To give some presentations on electric vehicle fires and traffic incident management and sharing what they've learned up to this point. We'll have a Q&A session with the presenters. So, think about your questions. Try to use the Q&A button that's down at the bottom there to pop, because we are monitoring it. So, we will address any questions. And we'll have a listening session, ideas for the year ahead. Brought to you by you folks, right? We greatly appreciate your input for that. It helps us along. So without further ado, let's get to those updates. So the items that we have, the responder line of duty deaths, which is always a very tragic and humbling session for us, but it shows the magnitude and importance of what we do. Talk a little bit about the advanced warning workshop that we had, and of course Crash Responder Safety Week, the successes there that just occurred last month. There's Talking Tim for January 22nd, 1:30. Sign up for the newsletter and Tim webinars. Talk for the recorded Tim webinars. Everything's recorded. You can go back to NOCO and pull up different sessions. So let's roll on. Yeah. As I said, as of the 27th, there are 39 responders that have lost their lives this year. And you can see the breakdown there. Law enforcement, fire EMS, tow operators. It's very, very, very tragic. in each of those cases. One of them was multiple responders, the three deputies that were struck, and unfortunately succumbed to their injuries were added. So, once again, it emphasizes the importance of what we do, and that the D drivers are leaning forward of what can we do to help, what can we do better. Next slide. Yeah, we had a great workshop in Indianapolis, hosted by Indiana DOT. They were very gracious to us, and we had a great facility and some great presenters there. That was over the Halloween holiday, if you would. Yeah, that we were out there. They had their Hoosier helpers on display. Some great presentations. Q warning vehicles, connected vehicle data. It was amazing to see the level of technical expertise, right? That's also working on the whole TIM, concept and initiative. Um, the digital alert systems and Pilot and PyLink and everything that we're doing out there to let the traveling public know what's happening up ahead, and hopefully long before they get to us so they can make those decisions. But we always have to keep our head on a swivel. That's the best warning device that we have, and that is staying situationally aware of what's going on around you, and knowing that a strike is out there, and that they're happening every day almost. I get notifications of somebody else or something else being struck on the scene. So we had a great time. As I said, the hosts were very gracious, and we'll have a little bit more information when the outcome of that and some of the action items a little bit later, in probably not by the end of this year, but certainly shortly thereafter. So yeah, it was a great time, and thanks to all who were there, all who participated and all helped us out. Even in the conditions, we had a little Murphy's Law thing going on, right? That we lost the HVAC because it was incredibly warm. So it was overall a great time, and we really appreciate all the initiative and participation that folks there had for us. Next slide. Crash Responder Safety Week, another successful week. That 1 week of the year where we get to stand on the highest mountain and beat our drum, and it was a success in many ways. Hopefully the message resonates beyond Crash Responder Safety Week. However, there were a lot of activities going on throughout that week. Next slide. The numbers, and real quick, 125 plus, virtual and in-person, national proclamation signatures, 25 plus state social media campaigns, 20 governor's proclamations, 40 plus mayoral, county executive, or other local proclamations, approximately. 3 all states planning webinars. We had 37 state and local representatives participating in that, and 15 plus televised events. And that's just what we know of, what we're aware of. Next slide. Yeah, here are the participating states, right, from this past Crash Responder Safety Week. And the 2025 goal, is all 50 states participate and push for the proclamations. And I know, if Jim's unable to join us today, Paul's online listening in. Um, Oftentimes the question comes up is, how far out should we start planning for, Crash Responder Safety Week? And I know Jim's standard answer is always the day after the last Crash Responder Safety Week. That's when the planning starts, and it's a huge lift, and it really does take that much time to pull it all together. And I know you folks know it too because you're well involved also. So it was a great success, a lot of participation. Next slide. There's the 20 state governors issued proclamations, and look at, if we're not showing you in there, and we missed your proclamation, there's a QR code for you. Please grab that right now, and I believe we'll also have something dropped into the chat, also with some links for today. So yeah, get it to us, and so that we can also promote your efforts, and get you into the count, and have that proclamation on hand. So if we did miss you, apologies, but yeah, it's not too late, right? Please send it to us. Next slide. Yeah, the impact, and you look at these numbers here. It's an incredible outreach campaign. You see the tens, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of retweets. I guess it's re-X's and X's. I guess this day, right? We used to tweet it, but now you X it. But nonetheless, the message was out there. All of the social media outreach, and you see down at the bottom, Colorado DOT, Washington State Patrol, Wisconsin. We're heavily into the to the Twitter X world, and had a tremendous outpouring of information there. Facebook, our good friends, IAFF, International Association of Firefighters, the Colorado State Patrol, St. Petersburg Fire Rescue, TRAA, the Transportation Recovery. Just Towing and Recovery Association, the work they do is incredible, and such a critical partner with us, that no incidents clear until they clear it, right? So yeah, they're great friends, all that are listed, and they did a fantastic job. When you look at these numbers, we have a great outreach, and once again, we just hope that message resonates beyond Crash Responder Safety Week. Next slide. So yeah, next year, already the date's already selected. We're already in the planning. November 17th through 21st. Mark your calendars. And if there's anything we can do to assist you along those lines, please feel free to reach out to us. We have a ton of information and tools that we can help you with. So please reach out to us and start your planning now, because it is quite the lift. Next slide. Yes, good deal. Hey, our first presenter, and let's get to it here. Is Justin Neff, Traffic Management Program Manager for the Delaware Valley. Um, Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission. And he's been involved in the EV task force since 2022. He's got some great information on that. Been with them since 2015. bridging that gap, between first responder community and transportation planning and engineering world. So Justin's got some great stuff that he's going to share with us right now. Justin, are you with us? You can come on board there, and we'll get you going here and share your message.
All right, appreciate that, Joe.
Thanks.
Thank you to Joe. Thank you to FHWA, NOCO. It's a big lift to get a webinar like this up and running, and they do a fantastic job. So kudos to everyone who got us here, and also for the opportunity to present today and to share the information. As Joe said, my name is Justin Neff. I'm a transportation planner with DVRPC, which is the Philadelphia area MPO. The fact that I am neither a responder nor an EV expert, that irony is not lost on me, and the fact that I'm about to give a presentation about EVs and how they impact responders. But hopefully, as we go through this presentation, you'll see the role that DVRPC played in the development and the facilitation of this task force. And perhaps we'll encourage some agencies to look at perhaps non-traditional partners when tackling really any sort of challenge. So on the next slide, you'll see a very general overview of today's presentation, origin and purpose of the task force, some outcomes and resources to date, and then some next steps. And that should really say potential next steps, because this whole space there's certainly a lot of unknowns, and we're hoping to be adaptable to those changes as they come along. So on the next slide, to provide some context, DVRPC, we have the opportunity to facilitate 8 traffic incident management task forces within the Philadelphia region. It's 8 surrounding counties. If you see on the left, Montgomery County actually celebrates its 25th anniversary next week. So if you happen to be in Montco and you want to swing by, I think we even have free food. So that's a milestone that we're really excited about. And there's been a lot of individuals, a lot of agencies to get us there. And then even Mercer County, which is our newest, is coming up on 10 years. Regardless of the task force, if you look in the upper right, that's the general makeup. Those are our core participants, DOT, fire, towers, any entity, any agency that responds to a roadway. Those are the participants in the task forces. That can ebb and flow depending on what initiatives. Perhaps there's a construction project that really impacts road users that may bring in a different contingent, but those are our core members. And although topics may vary, the primary purpose of these task forces is to improve roadway safety for all users, absolutely for first responders, but also for the traveling public in general. That is, every initiative, every conversation is supporting that objective. Anyone who goes out on the roadway in any capacity comes home, whether they're traveling or whether they're going out there to do a job. That's the purpose of these task forces. And I really need to thank all the co-chairs. Each task force has a co-chair who is typically a responder within that county, and they really are fantastic stewards of really bringing what information that county is seeking, and what are some issues that the task force could help address. On the next slide, you'll see some of the topics that these task force cover: after action reviews, blocking procedures. Pre-COVID, we started to get some EV conversations going. And then when we came back from COVID, EVs became the conversation. It really did not matter what our agenda was. If somebody mentioned electric vehicles, that was the rest of our meeting. And it's very important to have those conversations and to ask questions and discuss unknowns and uncertainties. But what was starting to happen is we didn't have any answers, and that was unfortunate. And it became, I don't want to necessarily say directionless, because we were hearing about issues that responders were facing, but we weren't able to provide anything. And that was problematic because we wanted the task force and the group to add value. So what was decided, and if you jump to the next slide, you'll see what we decided to do. And I want to pause here. I'm going to great lengths not to single out any individuals or any agencies, because if I do that, I'm going to miss someone. However, I'm going to single out Tony Correa. He is our Bucks County co-chair, and he is the one who really brought this idea to us. He saw that it was dominating the meetings, and he realized that there was an opportunity to dig deeper onto this topic, and he suggested, why don't we break it out? Why don't we have a separate group? So that's what we decided to do. And once that was decided, a lot of individuals and a lot of agencies helped to make it what it is, but he was the one who jump-started the idea. So the EV task force, very similar framework, similar members as our TIM task forces, but obviously EV focused. And so we have an EV task force. But if you see on the next slide, that's great. We have a task force. What does that mean? So what we had to do, we had our a couple. Sorry, stick with now what for just a second, because it was important. We were starting from nothing, so we had some conversations with individuals who seemed to have some knowledge on this, outreach, see if they were interested in this. I believe all of them said yes. Those who reached out to, they felt as though they could add value, and there was value to this task force. And then we expanded it. We invited all task force members, and we ended up with roughly 50 to 60 individuals, or a few dozen agencies from 2 states, all willing to participate in this group. So if you jump to the next slide, and this is just a general overview of the task force. I couldn't find the perfect spot for this slide, but the group is very collaborative, voluntary. There's a lot of really smart people in this space where there's some unknowns, and that leads to some pretty spirited conversations. But that collaboration is key, not just within the task force itself, but with our partners. As people identify best practices, they try to share best practices. But also, one of those bullets is giving credit. So yes, we want to share information far and wide, but we also want to acknowledge those who have put forth the effort and really have done the lion's share of the work. And that's a balancing act, and one that I think any working group really strives to achieve. And I believe this group has done a fantastic job doing that. So again, we have this group. Everyone's willing to work on something, but if you jump to the next slide, we needed to know, well, we're a task force. What is it? So collectively, it was decided that this is the mission statement. DVRPC's EV Task Force is a coalition of first responders and other related parties dedicated to improving outcomes of EV-related incidents on roadways in the Delaware Valley region. So in the same way that our TIM task forces, its primary purpose is responder and roadway user safety, this was to improve EV-related incidents on roadways. Lots of things we can do to support that, but that's our primary objective. And then the next slide goes into some of our goals that helps to support that. I would say, we've had varying degrees of success. Some we've been able to really sink our teeth into. Others, they're goals that we're working towards. And this is a never evolving group. So even where we have capacity may shift as well. So we had this mission statement, we had this task force, but there was still, what are we going to provide? How can we share this information? So on the next slide, you'll see what the task force has produced. And this was after discussion amongst the group and collaborating with some of our outside partners. It was decided to create an action checklist and then emergency operating best practices. And I hope I have this correct. Tony brought us a very general framework of a document from, I believe, Chicago, on how they were starting to look at EV incidents. And we used that as our jumping off point. And it became like a group project. We had a shared document, and all those members were making comments on it. They were suggesting this word over that word. Hey, let's change this font. And then the group was brought back together, and and I say they because the facilitator at the time, unfortunately, she's no longer with DVRPC, but she was really the driving force of this, keeping everyone focused on the end goal. And it was, what do you think of this line? Or is everyone good with this? And if you're saying nothing, that means you're in agreement. And it was a very collaborative and iterative process. But ultimately, these two documents were produced. And if you go to the next slide, you're able to access them through these on the left and the right are QR codes to access these documents. And then the center is an EV resource page. And that's basically a very, it's a website that DVRPC was able to stand up. And that's one of the opportunities, or one of the tools that DVRPC was able to bring to the table. And anyone can access this. There's a member sign in, but then there's also a lot of information there for anyone who's interested, responder or otherwise. Please share this. If you find things that you disagree with, let us know. We're really not interested in being right. We're interested in getting it right. So we want this to be ever evolving. So, and I'll share this again at the end. I believe they put the link in the chat. So if you jump to the next slide, and I'm not going to get into the weeds of all this stuff. The next presentation, Kareem's going to show the interesting stuff, the fires, the more technical side of it. But I just want to briefly go over this. This first video of thermal runaway, and you can start to play this. This, I believe, is really what jump-started the group, is a concern for this, is once batteries, and here there's 6 of them, or maybe 7, but when you extrapolate that to 7,000 that are in a Tesla, this is a concern, and rightfully so. And the question became, how is this dealt with, and then what are the ripple effects of this sort of incident? And does that change when there's a different level of charge and a different type of battery, and are they all uniform? So again, Kareem's going to get into more of that aspect of it, but I really think it was this concept and concern that got the group going. Next slide shows just the weight. Weight is different. And this is important, not just for responders, but also those designing parking structures. So if you're putting a charging station on the roof of a parking garage, understand that the vehicles you're parking there are going to be heavier, and the load capacity changes. Next slide. Kareem's going to go into this as well. It just shows the basic layout of an EV. And then the next one provides an overview of the towers. So towers they're instrumental. They're vital for both our TIM task forces and the EV task force. An absolute wealth of knowledge. They are the ones who literally have their hands on this technology, but there's a lot of concern coming from that profession. From dispatch, perhaps not giving them the proper information, perhaps dispatch isn't aware, to the insurance issues of insurance sometimes refusing to take vehicles, and then who's stuck with them. And if tow yards need more space, or they need to build structures to isolate them, is the township providing them with those ordinances? So towers heavily involved, and we hope to, we have some initiatives moving forward where we hope to really address this issue a bit more. And then the next slide shows, I mean, this is kind of emblematic of what towers are facing. You know, he's looking at like, man, what do I do with this? Unfortunately, and this is not to in any way poke fun at the fire extinguisher, but that's sometimes what it feels like. They don't have the right tools for the technology that they're up against. And he's towing it in the right way on a flatbed, but once it catches or reignites, there's nothing that he could do in that moment. And then if you look at that off-gassing that's occurring, the next slide, and this is something that was in the documents, is air quality. And you'll see a question mark pops up because I have no idea. I have zero idea what these numbers mean. But our responders do, and they feel it's very important to share. So responders that typically respond to internal combustion engine vehicles and may understand the toxins that they're dealing with. Well, this new technology brings a whole different set of chemical. I don't even really know how to put it, but this was information that needed to be shared and needs to be understood by anyone who is who deals with these types of vehicles. And then next slide, I think my question mark pops up, and then you can jump to the next one. So some general takeaways of the task force and really conversations that we've had. Sometimes and I'll speak to me personally, I think, oh, well, everyone already understands this, and I need to remind myself that that is not the case. And even if the responder community might be understanding it, well, does the rest of the transportation profession? So we're trying to spread this information, longer incident duration, more different resources, batteries can reignite, toxins embedded. And then that last one, the EVs are silent. That came up from some of our law enforcement partners. They train on using all their senses. Well, if they can't hear when an EV takes off, that may change their response. And actually, I was discussing EVs at a law enforcement meeting, and one of the SWAT members asked, "Well, where do I shoot it if I need to disable it?" I I didn't know that answer. So if anyone does know that, please let us know, and we'll pass that along. But you know, it's a different technology, and people need to become comfortable with the technology. So if you jump to the next slide, these are some of the current and ongoing initiatives. Really, number one is share and promote this information far and wide. As I said, I sometimes fall under the assumption that, well, I've been talking about this for 2 years. People must know it, and that's wrong. I need to um, continue to push it forward as much as possible. The group had the opportunity to meet with Department of Homeland Security. It was one of those cases where you assume that there's another agency that has it all covered and they're leaps and bounds ahead of everyone else. After the meeting, that is no longer the assumption. We've talked with townships about their parking garage ordinances, educating dispatchers. There's a number of our New Jersey partners who are doing a fantastic job of this, of getting this EV information into the hands of the dispatchers, so the dispatchers know what questions to ask when there's even the potential for it to be an EV. And then one pager for towers. We're hoping in early mid 2025 to have a quick informational page for towers to reference if they come across an EV. And then finally, where can the task force add value? Is there something that we feel, is almost the momentum is carrying us forward? Do we need to pivot to something else? And then technology is ever evolving. It's EVs now, but there's also hydrogen on the horizon. There's, or in some cases already here. And then there's autonomy. And is the framework of this task force something that could be applied to other changes, regardless of what it is? It's EVs now, but who knows what the next few years are going to bring. So that's the general overview. Again, if you're here for the fires and the really technical stuff, Kareem is going to get into that. But if you, on the next slide, it's the QR code to our webpage. There's my contact information. I need to thank all the members of the task force. So I have the opportunity here to speak and take credit for the work that others have done. And kudos to all them. Again, it's entirely voluntary. We hope to partner with other professionals and share knowledge and best practices moving forward. So thank you, everyone.
Hey, thanks, Justin. Great job, right? Fantastic job to you and the folks and the members of your task force. It's incredible stuff in the responder community. How we lean forward on these issues. And we're not sitting back and waiting for someone else to figure it out, right? We are those who are kind of assigned the duty of figuring it out, right? And what works in Alaska may not work in Florida, right? And everything in between. So In the 2-year project that the FHWA has been overseeing on EV fires, yeah, we've learned a lot of the same stuff, right? I mean, we're all leaning forward on this and coming up with ideas and practices, best practices, policies, to figure this one out. You can't talk traffic incident management for EVs without talking about the suppression methods and right and the other issues. So, it has a huge impact on traffic incident management. It's not the EV itself, right? It's the power plant, right? It's the method of the source of power for and that lithium ion issue. So, thank you, Justin. Great presentation. And folks, you'll have an opportunity to submit any questions for Justin. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and bring Kareem on. Kareem Williams. He's the manager of North Texas Tollway Authority Safety Services Division. And before the NTTA, Kareem served in the U.S. military as a military police officer, transportation specialist. And while serving his country, Kareem also served his local community as a volunteer firefighter, and he brings over 25 years of expertise in attending vehicle recovery operations. And I've seen the presentation, and it's outstanding. So, Kareem, thanks for joining us, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you folks.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. And welcome, everybody. Just kind of like what Justin reiterated, I do thank you for the platform to be able to speak about these topics because they are very, very important. And we are trying to get as much information out as we can. Again, just like Justin said, I am not an expert in EVs. I don't know many people who claim to be. We just deal with them on a daily basis. So we've learned some best practices for now that tend to try to keep our people safe when they're out there responding to these things. You can go to the next slide. And you can go to the next one. So North Texas Tollway Authority, we are a political subdivision of Texas. We are a government agency. We operate toll lanes across the North Texas region, roughly about 1,200 miles. I do manage our Safety Services Patrol, which is a 24/7 operation. We have about 78 employees, about 82 vehicles that respond to any incident, any traffic incident on our roadway. Um, our 2024 numbers aren't in yet, but last year we did just over 50,000 calls for service with an average response time of 17 minutes. And that response time is from the time we get a call for somebody needing help to the time we already have them on their way. So we deal with vehicles and we deal with traffic incidents on a daily basis. Next. So today I've been asked to talk a little bit about what we've seen with EVs. Again, not an expert. We just deal with a lot of them and we kind of learn along the way and we share what we learn with everybody because this industry continually changes and we try our best to stay just behind the power curve because we can't get in front of it because every time we get close, again, that curves even more and we get left behind and we keep continually struggling to gain as much knowledge and information on EVs as we can to keep responders safe. So first I'm going to start off with there's 4 basic types of EVs that you're going to run into out there on the road. You've got your hybrid electric vehicles, which most of you guys know they came out with the Honda Insight way back in the day. You had your Toyota Prius. Those vehicles back in the day, they had uh, limited range. They were just basic. They were the new thing out. Then they came out what's called the PHEV, which is a plug-in hybrid. This one has a little bigger battery than the hybrid two, and you can now plug it in and charge the battery directly. Then you've got your BEVs. These are what's commonly known as EV vehicles, right? These are your Teslas and all those other just the same. These are the ones you see out there the most. And now they're coming out with something called an EREV, which is extended range electric vehicles. Now, basic EVs can take you anywhere between 100 and 300 miles. These EREVs are claiming to go anywhere between 600 and 800 miles on just one charge. Next. So when responding to them, one of the difficulties is identifying which type of vehicle you're dealing with, whether it's an ICE engine, a hybrid, extended range. you're trying to figure out what are you dealing with, and it's being difficult because the identifying factors on these vehicles continually change with every year model they come out with. They all look the same. Like for instance, if you look at the Corvette that's in the top left picture, that looks like a regular Corvette, but believe it or not, that's their blue. They're calling it a Blu-ray, and that's a hybrid electric vehicle. Go to the next slide. So how do you tell the difference? Well, normally you can look at the badging that's on it, and it does either say hybrid or say EV, or to have a blue symbol, like a lot of manufacturers will do. They'll put their symbol in blue to represent an EV. If it's missing a tailpipe, doesn't have an exhaust system at all, doesn't have grills in the front that actually have the holes in them, then most likely you're dealing with an EV. You can check the gas port to see if there's a gas cap or a charging port, and that'll let you know it's an EV. And obviously, the orange color high voltage wires is a big sign that it's an EV. Now, remember when I said every time we learn something, they change things? Well, Tesla, for instance, they're going to start debadging their vehicles. So basically, unless you can identify what a Tesla looks like, which most of us can, you won't know it's an EV. But other manufacturers where you may not know that they actually make EVs, you won't be able to tell that's an EV just by looking at it. They're going to debadge them and make them look just like the regular vehicles. Some manufacturers are putting fake tailpipes on EVs because of the look. A lot of customers want the aesthetics. So you'll see a tailpipe and then you'll think, okay, this is a regular car, and it turns out it's an EV. And then as you can see in the bottom picture, they're moving that charging port from where the gas tank normally is to different places. Like on that Mercedes, it's in the rear bumper. On that Audi, it's in the front grille. So again, as I'm giving you this information, just understand this is what's current, but it keeps changing. The industry keeps changing. Next. So here are some resources to kind of help you when you're pulling up to an EV and you try to identify it and figure out what you're dealing with. They've got an app called the Crash Recovery System that I notice a lot of people use. There's also the Energy Security Agency. These guys, they're awesome because they have an 800 number that responders can call 24/7, and you can actually get a live person. And you let them know what you have and what type of vehicle you're dealing with, and they actually will walk you through the steps you need to take care of whatever you need to take care of with that vehicle. We've used them before, and it actually works. And then we have another app called the Electric Vehicle Rescue app. And this is the one we typically use the most out here. You can go to the next slide. This is kind of what it looks like. You can go do anything from getting your emergency response guides off of them to locations of the battery and the high voltage cables to if it's a motorist assist, how to jack the vehicle up safely to where you won't interfere with the battery or touch any of the high voltage wires, how to stabilize it. If you get somebody who's out of a charge or close to it and you need to figure out where the nearest charging station is, this app does it all. But once again, I'm going to tell you, the industry keeps changing. So this app is normally 4 to 5 months behind. So if you get a new version of a vehicle out, it takes about that long before they update their system and get it out to you. But it is one of the best things we have right now to help us when we're out there in the field. Next. So what's the big deal with these batteries? Well, when EVs first came out, and you can click the next, when they first came out, they were made of mostly of nickel metal hydride battery. And this battery was good. This is what you saw in, like I said, the early model hybrids. The only issues with it is it had a high self discharge rate, and also it suffered from something called the memory effect. That discharge rate is basically, the percentage of the battery decreases the more you charge it. But that memory effect is when people would plug their vehicle, charge it to what they claim is 100%, but then only drive it down to 70% and then put it back on a charger, recharge it again, that battery would then memorize it only charging that 30%, and it would actually affect the battery that way. So people didn't want that. Plus, they wanted to go further. They wanted to go faster. So the industry switched over to lithium ion. Well, lithium ion obviously was more power density, right? It had a lower discharge rate. It didn't suffer from the memory effect as much, and it charged faster. The only problem with lithium ion is the fact that it does not play well with heat or salt water. Being submerged, it doesn't play well at all. It's more unstable. Next. So they change how they mount these things with the lithium ion batteries. And this is what most manufacturers are doing right now. They have something called a skateboard, where it is a floor pan battery mounted at the bottom of most of these EVs. Believe it or not, it is actually part of what they consider the frame of the car. So if you were to take your electric vehicle into the shop, have them take your battery out, they actually have to put a note on your car that basically says nobody can sit in the vehicle. Because if a 100-pound person sat in that vehicle, it would actually warp the frame of your car without the battery. That's how important this battery is to the structure of these EVs. Next. So this is another look at it. Now, most people think EV batteries are just one big battery. They're not. What happens is this floor plan is made up of what they call modules, and they have hundreds of these modules, and inside the modules are little bitty batteries like you saw in Justin's presentation. There's little bitty batteries like AA batteries, and that's what actually makes up your EV battery. Now, altogether, these things are very heavy. This one, as you can see, weighs 1,200 pounds. I looked up the Hummer EV. The battery on that weighs almost 3,000 pounds, just the battery. The truck itself is about 10,000 pounds, and that's just a regular size pickup truck. So these things are very heavy. Next. And this is what they look like. If you look at the hand that's to the right on your screen, that's what the batteries currently look like. Again, they look like little AA batteries, and you're looking at anywhere between 6,000 and 8,000 of these things inside of those modules, which are inside of your big battery. The one on the left is what they're trying to go to here in the future. Again, though, they're very small little batteries that make up your floor pan battery. Next. So what are some response techniques that we've utilized out here that's worked for us? Obviously, first and foremost, anytime you respond to any incident, you want to set up a good safe work zone area or a traffic control area, or a traffic management area, whatever you call it. You want to make sure your responders are safe. Get that done first. Then, as you're going to your casualty, you need to identify if it's an EV and what type of EV it is. That way you can get all the information you need, hopefully through one of those resources or experience from people on scene, to know what to do if it's suffering any type of heavy damage, if it's smoking or off-gassing, obviously if it's on fire or it's been submerged. Another thing to look for, if it's popping or hissing, that's a clear sign that it is going into thermal runaway. Okay, it is about to off gas if you hear that. Also, if you smell what kind of smells like a sweet burning smell when you walk up to an EV, that's also another sign that it may be off gassing and going into thermal runaway. Anytime that happens, we recommend staying back at least 75 feet. And I will tell you, I just had another meeting, some part of an EV task force with a lot of the city fire departments in the area. And they're now recommending that 75 feet be pushed back to about 300 feet if you know that it is going to go into thermal runaway. So like I said, this is always changing. If you don't see any of that and you're just approaching the vehicle, some best techniques is don't approach the vehicle directly from behind or directly from in front. Reason being is these EVs have been known, even without the operator inside the vehicle, to take off if they are misbehaving. Okay, so you don't want to approach them from the front or rear. You want to approach it from an off angle, kind of like you do if you were trying to put out a car fire. Approach it from an off angle. When you do, stabilize the vehicle with chocks. Now, again, with these EVs, we in the industry, we used to be able to put that chalk on there like at a 45-degree angle because it's easier to take back off and the vehicle wouldn't go anywhere. With EVs, you can't do that. You have to put that chalk flush against the wheel because these EVs have so much torque that at a 45-degree angle, they've been known to drive over chalks and still run over responders. So if you're going to chalk it, put it flush against the wheels on it. And again, obviously, if you do see that it's misbehaving in any way, just stay away from it. Another thing that we've learned is kind of works for us is take the RFD device, or sometimes it's a credit card, sometimes it's a fob, but whatever that operator is using to power that vehicle, get at least 75 feet away from the vehicle. Or if you got a Faraday bag, put it in there. We've even used paint cans with lids. If you get an old paint can and you got a lid, you can put that device in there, close it, and that'll block the RFID device. That way that electric vehicle doesn't power up on you without you wanting it to. Again, they've been known to take off without the operator inside and run over responders. So these are just some best practices we've learned with them. Next. Having some type of a four-gas meter works really well for us. That way you can kind of keep an eye on it, measure if anything's going on. At a minimum, at least have a carbon monoxide meter, because these vehicles, when they start to archive, they do let that off. A tick, or I'm sorry, a thermal imaging camera, that works out very well, so you can monitor the battery and make sure it's not heating up on you. These are things that we utilize just to kind of stay ahead of the game and know if the vehicle is going to misbehave before we're actually right in the middle of a fire. Next. Audio on this one. This just shows how quickly it can go from off-gassing to thermal runaway in a vehicle. And this is in a parking garage. And that's how quick it happened. Now, sometimes it'll off-gas for a little bit longer, but sometimes it doesn't. And this is why you want to utilize those instruments in the slide before to try to monitor it so you can catch it before it actually happens. Next. This is, if you can listen to the audio, you can hear the hissing and popping of an EV when it's about to go into off-gassing. Sometimes you hear a whine, almost like a jet engine as well. Now, here's the thing. Once it goes into thermal runaway, that flame can shoot out anywhere between 6 and 12 feet, and it's shooting out from the bottom of the vehicle. A normal car fire will burn at roughly 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, EV fires have been known to burn about 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is a very, very hot fire that will burn through a firefighter's turnout gear. And because it's shooting out like a flame, it is just a very dangerous thing to deal with. Not to mention the gases that are coming off of a thermal runaway are toxic. Okay, unfortunately, first responders have died from breathing in the toxic fumes from an EV fire. It's to the point now where a lot of firefighters and fire departments in the North Texas area, they're now coming up with policies to where until you know that an EV is safe, their guys are going on full oxygen. And then they approach the EV, make sure it's safe, and then they can take it off and deal with whatever they're dealing with. Just because they don't want to take the chance of breathing that in. Here's the other joy with EV fires once they start. If you go to the next slide, these things burn so hot that they will not only melt the brakes off of the EV that the fire is coming from, but any vehicles next to them. So if you're dealing with this in a parking garage, you understand the brakes may fail and that vehicle that you're dealing with may roll away on its own if it's not stabilized, and any vehicles next to it may roll away as well. Just because the fire is so low and shooting out so hard, it will melt the brakes off it. Again, at 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, this will melt steel. This is a very, very hot fire. Next. Couple of things with the let it burn. One of the fire chiefs in this area, he said it best, and I always use this analogy. He said, putting out an EV fire is like if you've got a 3-story home and the fire's in the basement, the only place you can put water is on a roof and you got to put it out. That's how dealing with an EV fire is. And I think that's just amazing to show you how hard it is to put these things out. The let it burn. Obviously, it is hard for a first responder to sit there and watch something just burn down. But fortunately, what they found is, for one, it's safer for responders because they're not sitting there trying to breathe that in while they're trying to attack the fire and put it out. Two, it's been known that if you let an EV fire burn itself out, for one, you're basically taking away all the energy that's in that battery, and it tends to burn itself out quicker than if you try to fight it and cool the battery down. Understand something. You can't put out an EV fire because it creates its own oxygen. All you can do is try to cool the battery to stop that chemical reaction. So that's either with direct cooling or indirect, but all you can do is try to cool that battery if you're not letting it burn. Now, obviously, if the scenario you're in doesn't allow you to let it burn, whether it's in a garage, it's going to burn through some type of infrastructure, like if you're on an overpass or anything like that, they will try to offensively attack it and they've got different methods. We've heard about the blanket, the fire blanket, where you can try to smother it. Here's what we found with the fire blankets. For one, I don't know if you guys ever dealt with one, but they cost about $3,000 for one blanket. Two, they weigh about they weigh about 100 pounds roughly for the ones that we use. Also, they're typically a one and done. Once you put that fire blanket over EV fire, unless you're going to pay to go have it decon, which probably going to run you another $1,500 to $2,000, it's a one and done. So it's just not very cost effective either. And then remember, once you do put that fire blanket over it, because you've got to secure the bottom of it, you got to secure it down. Somebody has to remove that to check to see if the EV has stopped going in the thermal runaway, and that's a lot of heat and a lot of chemicals that they're going to have to deal with when they're trying to remove that. So that's the deal that we found with the blanket. Packing in a wet sand, we've seen that work for some situations. We did have one where there was a big enough hole in the battery to where we were able to penetrate the battery, let all of those individual cells that we showed you earlier, the little double A's, let them all fall out, and we actually were able to cool the batteries themselves. Now, most electric vehicle manufacturers will tell you they do not recommend you penetrate the battery, but obviously in that scenario, with it already being penetrated, that was the easiest way for us to deal with that EV fire at the time. And then, of course, you heard about submersion. We've seen it to where we've had a vehicle out on a dirt road, and we've actually dug a hole underneath the vehicle, dug it and filled it with water and tried to cool the battery that way, let the vehicle sink into the water to cool it. So submersion does work as well. And then a lot of fire departments are using what's called the tilt and cool technique, where they will actually lift the car up and stabilize it at like a 45-degree angle. And then that way they can put direct water onto the battery to try to cool it. So these are I say the best practices for trying to deal with an EV fire that we've seen in this area. Next. And again, this is just showing you the different methods, the tilt and cool at the top left. There are devices that they are trying out here, such as one's called the Turtle, where you can put it on the end of a straight pipe, slide it up underneath the car, and it's supposed to douse the battery, cool it down with water. Again, these are things we're trying. There's nothing that works for every EV fire that we found yet. Of course, you got the submersion, and then of course the blanket. Next. So like you heard in the video, one of the big issues with these EV fires is that they can reignite because they still have energy trapped in them even after you think they're done with the thermal runaway. So one of the things that we're trying to do in this area is we're actually putting together a policy to have the fire department follow the tow truck once the vehicle's loaded on, actually follow the tow truck to the tow yard and watch them unload it into an EV safe area. That way we can ensure that the tow truck operators are safe as well. And we're keeping an eye on it. If you go to the next slide, you'll see now this slide used to be the record holder, and I'm being told it is no longer now. But this is an EV that went in a thermal runaway. They were able to put it out. It got towed to the tow yard, dropped, and 29 days later, it reignited and burned down to what you see now. And I thought that was the limit, but apparently there's EVs that have reignited even longer than that now. But look at this slide, is 29 days later. This shows you how much energy is still trapped in those EVs even after it finishes the thermal runaway. Next. And this is where I'm going to conclude. I can talk to you about EVs all day long, but we only have a certain amount of time. But if you have any questions during the Q&A session, I'll be glad to answer them. But just understand, again, in no way do I consider myself an EV expert. I can only go off of what we've seen.
Yeah, outstanding. Outstanding, Kareem. Great stuff, right? Leaning forward, addressing the issue, and you too, Justin, and your task force. And there are so many agencies working to try to resolve this issue. We're all leaning forward on it. We're all finding our own way, and we're watching this kind of evolve, right, in real time. In a way that at times, many times, are very frustrating. We at Federal Highway, as I mentioned earlier, have a contract and have for the past 2 years and have extended another two, and doing the research on the effects of traffic incident management, EV fires, EV incidents out on the roadway. And I can tell you, our research has taken us into other areas that we didn't really initially suspect that we'd be in, but commercial EVs, commercial vehicles that are out there. Some of those don't have a battery pan; they have multiple battery pans. The tractors of a tractor trailer, for instance, right? So they have multiple battery pans. So there's another challenge there. We're also looking at potential infrastructure damage from a burning vehicle. All right. If it's sitting in a travel a roadway and it burns for a while, the vehicle may eventually, go out. All fires eventually go out, just like all bleeding eventually stops. But once that vehicle it leaves the scene, once it leaves the scene, there may be some intense infrastructure damage where the lane still isn't open, right? So traffic incident management has to be prepared for that. And what if it's on a bridge? Right? As Kareem was mentioning, the temperatures involved, or in a tunnel, right? I mean, there are, and you bet your bottom dollar, unfortunately, it's going to happen. Eventually, it's going to happen. So yeah, it's taken us down that road. And of course, battery pans. These battery pans that Kareem and Justin were talking about. At the assembly plants for EVs, the battery pans have to get there, right? And they're being transported as cargo, right? Tractor trailer. It could be a diesel powered tractor trailer with 53-foot trailer loaded with battery pans on its way to an assembly plant somewhere. And that's already occurred where the cargo has ignited and shut down a major thoroughfare for hours and hours. So, we have that, EV battery pans as cargo, not even in a vehicle, so to speak. That off-gassing issue, it's taken us into the respiratory hazard world of the off-gassing of EVs. And as Kareem mentioned, the safety zone distances that are being utilized now. And with that off-gassing, most of those byproducts of combustion, as mentioned earlier by Justin, that's heavier than air, right? So if there's no environmental assistance like wind, right? We have that to deal with low-lying toxic off-gassing. And if we do have a breeze blowing it through the tree line into a cul-de-sac community. Now what do we do? Right? I mean, all of these issues, as soon as we address one, there's another one waiting on us. And then there's, as Kareem mentioned, we're finding the turnout gear damage and personal protective equipment damage because of the byproducts of combustion. There's data out there that shows that you throw water into an off-gassing lithium-ion battery, you can produce hydrofluoric acid, I believe it is, right? So that has a huge effect on any turnout gear and self-contained breathing apparatus. All of these things are beginning to come to light, and they all have an effect on the TIM timeline, right? So from a traffic incident management standpoint, 1 minute you're dealing with a vehicle smoking on the side of the road, and next thing you know, it's fully involved, and maybe you're shutting down. You have to shut down because of smoke promulgation across the roadway. You can't just let drivers drive through that, right? I mean, all of these issues are coming to light, and even on the federal side, Federal Highway, NHTSA, the National Institute of Health, CDC, the United States Fire Administration, Transportation Research Board. We all have some type of research going on with this issue. And the whole commercial vehicle thing. we're starting to address that and bring those players in. So, thank you guys for what you're doing, and everyone else, that's here joining us for the efforts that you're taking, because we're all starting to think out of the box a little bit. And as mentioned earlier, it's really tough, on a fireside, to stand there and just let something burn. That's not a dumpster, maybe, right? That's a tough act. And then there are some departments that are getting creative to hook up to these things and drag them off the traveled roadway and off into the side soft shoulder somewhere to let them burn, right? They're just getting creative. But that act alone is something that's way out of the comfort zone of the fire service, right? Rarely does the fire service relocate their fire. So that's another cultural behavioral kind of thing that we have to address. So it's great information. Everyone's working on it together. And at this point, we're going to open it up for the questions. And I know we have a few that we have in and for some particular reason, I don't have a Q&A pod on my screen. So Vishali, if you're there, could you pop one up?
Absolutely. So I think one of the questions that was asked is, is there an effort to prevent manufacturers from removing the EV identifications on vehicles so that it's easier to identify them at a crash scene? I don't know that you all have a response, but I thought that was an interesting question by Terry Thompson.
So I wouldn't say I have a definitive answer, but I know these discussions have come up. And from what I recall, this can only be done at the federal level. And over the last few years, the approach has been more of a hands-off approach. Perhaps the new administration will change that and be more hands-on in terms of regulating this. I have some guesses, but that's the only way for it to happen is at that level.
Thank you. And then another question was asked for you, Justin. Can you share sample ordinances that were adopted in the DVR PC area based on this work group?
In terms of off the top of my head, or actually get the ordinances?
No. Like after the fact, if you could share a link to some sample ordinances, we could make them available. There were folks that were interested in, maybe replicating that effort.
I will certainly reach out to some of the townships and see if they're comfortable with that being shared.
Okay, great. And then Kareem, are you willing to share your contact information in the chat pod? Because I know there are folks that have a lot of follow-on questions for you or requests for information.
Absolutely.
Excellent. So Kareem will do that shortly. And then I think we have some questions just more broadly for both presenters. Justin, I know you talked about a fact sheet as another potential future product for tow organizations in their response to EV incidents. When do you see this fact sheet becoming available?
We're hoping mid 2025.
Okay, and are you still soliciting input into that fact sheet if there are folks that have feedback?
We are always open for business on feedback, on best practices, on contacts. Absolutely, my contact information should be hopefully shared somewhere. If not, if you go to the webpage that we stood up, I believe you can all of our contact information is there, or you can even input questions.
Yeah,
That's a maybe.
It's there. So if I think Shula put it into the chat already, so you should have it for sure. And then I think the other question is, are all of the many TIM task force representatives that are in the EV task force, are they all represented? And how do the different task forces contribute or support resources for this new stood up task force on EV?
I would say it's a very it's a complex Venn diagram. There's a lot of overlap. some do sit on 2, 3, even 4 different task forces. And if the EV task force comes up with best practices or identifies some potential funding or training, we share that then with the general task forces. And if there's an interesting after action review that comes up at one of our TIM task forces, we bring that back to the EV task force. So again, they're very they're interwoven
Okay,
intentionally. So
thank you. And then for Kareem, how is your agency and your fellow response agencies managing the resource needs for these EV fires? You talked about some of the costs. And I believe you're muted. Sorry, if you might unmute.
I sure was. I appreciate that. As far as the Safety Service Patrol, we're adding new vehicles to deal with EVs, such as we're upgrading our SRVs, which were not the normal common wreckers. We're upgrading them to flatbed trucks, just to be able to handle the weight of these EVs. Because again, the typical electric vehicle weighs 1,500 to 2,000 pounds heavier than its ICE counterpart. So we are adding those to try to help with that. And then I know a lot of my fire department counterparts, they're looking at trying to get budgets or grants in to buy a lot of the equipment needed to deal with these EVs. For instance, with us, we're purchasing ticks for all of our vehicles. That way, we have them. We're getting the gas meters in. Fire departments, they're looking at different ways to purchase. Well, actually, they're trying to figure out a way so that they can get their turnout gear cleaned after dealing with these EV fires, because that's a huge cost on these fire departments. That is a huge cost, getting all that stuff cleaned out, getting all the toxins taken out of it. So they're trying to figure out how to roll that into the hazmat portion of when they're billing the hazmat back. So we're trying different things to see how we can manage it, but to say we have a solution for all, we're not there yet.
if I could just
Okay.
jump on that funding, just the general funding issue. DVRBC is attempting to, I can't say we've been overly successful, tie funding for first responder, whether it's resources, training, to funding for charging stations. So if a corridor is getting X amount of dollars or X number of charging stations, any agency that would respond to an incident in that region, again, tie those two together. Again, we haven't really had much success in terms of dollars, but we have had success in terms of conversations with those who are planning and implementing these charging stations. So it's valuable just to have the conversation itself, even if initially it doesn't lead to direct dollars. So that might be something agencies are able to do.
Very, very good point. Thank you, Justin. There's a lot of questions. I think one that was asked is how frequent are EV fires on the roads today? I don't know if Kareem or Justin, you have a feel for that.
I don't have statistics to say what's the increase each year, but I will tell you something weird happened to me the other day. I pulled up to a light, and I'm in the Dallas area. I pulled up to a light, and it was about 3 lanes wide. I looked to my left, I looked to my right, then I looked behind me, and every vehicle that was at that light, except for me, was an EV. And that's never happened to me before. So that shows that each year, the number of EVs that are purchased and are out on our roadway is increasing. So obviously, the number of incidents are going to increase as well. I have noticed that our number of incidents with EVs has increased, but as far as fires themselves, that I don't know yet.
And I think it's a really good point to highlight that these aren't happening on every corner every time you're walking down the street. And something that we've come up against when we've presented this is we've been accused of being anti-EV or trying to implement scare tactics, which is not in any way what we're trying to do. And then it becomes almost a partisan issue, which isn't obviously is not the objective. So really presenting this, just having the conversation as this is a new technology. There's a full life cycle to this technology. the charging stations are the easy, or maybe easy is wrong, but the front end of it, but there's a whole additional life cycle to this conversation, and just presenting it in that way invites more people to the conversation and makes it a conversation versus you're against it or you're for it. No, we're just trying to address this issue and make it better for all users. Those who have EVs, those who don't, responders, and all, expand it out from there.
Thank you. Any last questions that anyone has? Feel free to add them to the Q&A, or at this point, you can also add them to the chat pod. We'll try to address that. And if not, then we'll move on to the listening session for this webinar.
Outstanding. Yeah, thank you, Justin, and thanks, Kareem. So now is the next slide, and the next
Great.
year is almost upon us. We always look forward, look to y'all for ideas, suggestions, any opportunities, and of course we're always looking for other experts in the field, right? To come on, talk to Tim and share what you're doing with us. So I'm gonna open the floor there to see if what suggestions you may have that we could possibly focus on beyond what we're already doing, or what we're doing, and maybe take a different angle at it. So we're looking forward to hearing from you folks. So whatever you have, now's the time. We love to hear it.
So in this portion, if you, I don't know if you can provide inputs via the chat. EV incident response is definitely one of the challenges perhaps that your organization will focus on for year 2025. But are there other challenges, or are there specific opportunities that you see to make improvements in the practice of traffic incident management, whether those opportunities are through the lens of the National TIM Responder Training, next generation TIM technologies for saving lives, UAS technology, debris removal systems, early notification of responder activity, or if it's something more strategic, like improving the laws related to slow down, move over activities in your state, or things of that sort. Would love to hear through the chat, what is it that your TIM organization, your TIM community hopes to focus on for the next coming year? So we see somebody said integrating the CRM to traffic incident management. Very interesting. I don't know, Kevin, are you able to unmute individuals if they make a request?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so if anyone would like to be requested to be unmute to share their opportunities and challenges that you hope to focus on for 2025, please raise your hand or make the request, and Kevin will unmute you. Okay. All right, looks like Anthony Correa would like to share.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
All right. Hi, my name's Tony Correa. I'm also with the DVRPC task force, and I would like to congratulate my colleague Justin for continuing to represent us well and be a champion for everything you do. All of Traffic Incident Management Task Force, and especially EV incidents where you have multiple responder agencies, could benefit by integrating the crew resource management process that has been built into the airline industry, healthcare, emergency medical services, and even the fire service. And I know there's very complex components of it, but I think we could make it simplified, and it addresses a lot of the human factors of dealing with incidents that would help us be more effective and would increase our situational awareness, communications, and overall operational effectiveness.
Thank you, Tony. Well said. Anyone else that would like to share their focus for year 2025? All right, well, not seeing other hands raised. Joe, I think we're coming to a close.
Yeah, I think we are. Opportunity to give you a couple minutes of your day back.
Oh.
Greatly appreciate
Actually,
the
sorry, Joe,
participation.
can we put a pause for one more? There's a really interesting question that just came up, which is,
Yeah, sure.
do non-responder decision makers and elected officials understand these issues with EVs? If so, what has worked to educate them? Justin and Kareem, maybe we'll bring you back up and see if you have any thoughts on that question. Very good question, Eileen.
Well, I don't necessarily
Oh,
want to, I can't speak to every elected official, but like with any topic, it's easier to pick a side and just say they're either good or they're bad. And that's why I think simply educating in a very straightforward manner, presenting data as opposed to just showing, the more dramatic side of things really goes a long way to getting more and more people, especially the elected officials and those people controlling the purse strings, to the table, and to be able to look at it in more of an objective way versus it's good, it's bad, which really doesn't benefit any topic. So that's my vague answer to that.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I know we have our good friends and Tim Champions from the Towing and Recovery Association that have joined us, and I know they have heavy involvement in this. All right, they have a lot of other issues besides traffic incident management with EVs, and they always have their day at the Hill. And they're always involved in getting the support of the Congress, the Senate, and others to address issues. So whatever they can accomplish, right? As in a lot of other things, we can our officials, our government officials. So kudos to them because and others that are constantly knocking on those doors of our elected officials saying, hey, we've got a problem and it's a life safety problem. Please help us. But the wheels of politics turn slowly. I guess I'll say that, make that as kind as I can. But yeah, there is there is action in that arena. So it doesn't hurt to lean on your elected officials in your area to get some action.
All right. I think that's it. We are ready to close. Sorry about that little injection, but it was an interesting question.
It is. So thanks everybody. Thank you, Vishali. Thanks, Noko. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Kareem. Thank you all for enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks. Appreciate it. See you next month.